Guys, thank you. So, Ananta, blessings and lovely to have you with us today.
Yeah,
And I
lovely.
hear you're being beamed in from sunny Portugal.
Well, yeah, it's a little bit sunny, but it's really strong wind. It's a lot cooler than I expected.
Ah, but no doubt warmer than London, no doubt. So, Ananta, today we're here obviously to talk about your new book, what looks through your eyes,
Yeah.
and obviously it'd be nice to get some background, and
Okay.
maybe to start with how you got here, how you got to this free place. So maybe give us a few words on how you got here.
Oh, let's just say that right from the beginning of this life, there was a knowing that what we're being told, everything we're being told about this systemic way to grow and to go to school and get the exams and get the job and then get the house and then get that's not it, so there was like a real there's some message or something.
That's okay.
Yeah, so there was a real like some kind of angst in me at knowing that this is not it. I didn't really see the point in all this, and there was like a growing feeling of, as soon as I'm old enough, I'll just like go out there and find out, find a way to be free of all that. So first of all, that took the form of finding freedom in all the ways that yeah, I mean, that felt free, like leaving school early and going partying and trying all the things that gave the feeling of freedom. I started traveling really early and breaking the rules, actually. um yeah, there was just some kind of rebellious in me, that was rebelliousness, that was looking for something that wasn't being handed on, handed over. And I just thought, this is all like not it. So yeah, first it took the form of rebelliousness, and then I left England. Finally, I was about 19, and I went with a one-way ticket in search of freedom. And I guess in the beginning, freedom felt like giving everything up, going, not knowing when I'd be back or how I'd survive, or not really having much money, just knowing that I'd find my way, So it was like a jump into the unknown. And yeah, that led me into all kinds of mischief. And I got to find out where true freedom isn't, and that, first of all, was by, I had the idea that having lots and lots of money would be, then you could do whatever you like, and then you'd be free. So I got myself in that situation where there was lots and lots of money, and I came to know the limitations within that, and lots of lessons in finding out the illusion of material fulfillment. I mean, I could go into those lessons, but there's so many areas. And I also explored drugs, um, different sorts of drugs, which took me into other spaces and places that gave me a taste of something that was not of this world. And that kind of opened doors to, yeah, it broke through the illusion of, what we look around, we look even at our hand and think it's solid, and then when we see through it, and it's all just moving, and we see it's just energy, and we're looking through it, and we see the illusion of matter, and we see through all of this. It's like it opens something in the brain that sees through separation. So the first glimpses were coming in that way. And of course, you can't keep doing that all your life.
What influences did Osho have in your early life? 'Cause I know you spent some time at the ashram in Pune.
Yeah, so from there I went off to Thailand. I ended up living free on a beach in Thailand with no schedule and no, just free. And I had apparently had everything I wanted in the sense of, I was in my 20s, and I had travel, I had love, I had money, I had playfulness, I had partying, I had everything. And there was still something that was not answered. And I just need to know what it is. And one day I was talking to somebody who had been working in Japan, and she was on her way to India. And I said, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm going to my guru." And I said, "What's that? What's a guru? What's?" And she said, "Oh, look, I leave you this book." And she handed me this book, and it was an Osho book. It was Tantra, Spirituality and Sex. And I was also at that time really having a deep question around that issue, because I had an opening in my being to what I now know as, what I came to know was called Tantra. I had an opening of feeling really at one with everything, and only being able to have sex in that way. I couldn't go in the other conventional way, and it felt like there's something wrong with me. Is there something wrong with me? And when she handed me this book, from the first moment I started reading it, the words that were just coming out of this page were speaking from a deep, deep place in me that didn't have those words, but had that knowing. So it was like it was speaking to that in me, and something was just going, "This is it, this is it, this is it." And I think somewhere in that book, or somewhere, I read him saying, like, "If you're reading these words, you're one of my sannyasins and you're being called." And I was like, okay, how'd you get there? How'd you go? And I just started packing my bags. And, I heard about Pune, this ashram in India, and all the wild things that were going on there. The dynamic meditations, the shouting, the screaming, I wanted to know about that, So I started packing my bags and looking for a plane ticket, and booked to go to India. I got everything together and I started my journey. And on the way, I heard the news that he left his body as I was on my way. However, it was like he was inside of me. He was so present in me. And the calling was still, it didn't make any difference that his body, because his body wasn't here anyway, but his consciousness was inside of me. And so I kept going. I knew that that's where I was going, that he was where I needed to go. And on the way, I found out that all the mad, crazy sannyasins were creating all kind, like it was mad. But inside of me was a calling for silence. I wanted a deep inner journey. I had enough of all the partying, of all the sex and drugs, of all the wild. I wanted to know what silence is. And so on the way, I met other people, and I took a plane to Kathmandu, and I went into a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And I felt like I was being guided by his consciousness. I felt so connected, like he was speaking to me. And I went there, and I had my first experience of the first satori, you know, what they call satori in Zen Buddhism, in that 10-day silent retreat. After walking for 3 months in the mountains alone, in solitude, I went into that 10-day and had the first stopping of the mind and the realization that we are not this form, that there is a cyclic existence, and like I came to know karmic cyclic existence, the whole concept of all of that, and like something began to awaken in me. And from then on, I went to Osho ashram. And do you want to know about that, or is that?
Well, how did the Japanese part of your life kind of come into it?
Well, I'm kind of
Unpeeling.
Yeah. So I was in Pune in the ashram for 18 months. So I think it's important to say that before I went back to Japan, because I'd been going to Japan for a few years already, a couple of years, I went to Osho ashram, and I did a whole series of deep meditation workshops, awareness intensive, the inquiry of who am I did all kinds of stuff, all in silence for months, and I took my name, right? And when I took my name, the same night, the billionaire boyfriend that I had met in Spain left his body. So that was a great big shock and another satori. What it meant was that I now, because when you take sannyas, you surrender your past. You surrender everything to do with your past. You surrender who you were before you take the name. You surrender absolutely everything. And so I surrendered all of the life that night with 500 people singing and dancing and celebrating this initiation process. And I became Ananta. And in the morning, I got a fax telling me that what was left of my name before, Kerry, connected with this billionaire Arab sheikh boyfriend, was gone. It was gone. It was no more. So that was a big shock. And again, I had the stopping of the mind for about a month. I couldn't find a thought. However, what it meant was that I had to go back to Japan because now I had no money. And so I went back to Japan, really not wanting to step into the energy I needed to step into to go there, because I was in such a pure place. I'd really taken on a spiritual life. And so stepping back there was like to step into the old version of who I was up until that point, the wild child, all of that. And I had to go back and step into that energy to do the work there, to get fast money and leave. And so I was only there about 6 weeks, and some friends, a lot of my friends, a lot of them were still in the LSD world, the partying, the drugs. And I had one foot that was still in that world and those connections, and the other foot was stepping into a spiritual life. I was learning healing, shiatsu, all this stuff. And I was like this. And so one of the friends, it is a long story, but somebody stayed in my apartment and had a large amount of LSD and needed to leave the country, and the person who was going to buy it from her didn't take it, and so she left it in my apartment, and it was there 5 days, and then I got raided. So I want to say that deeply inside of me, deep was still this screaming for silence. It was a feeling like, stop the world, I just want to get off, you know, that I want silence, I want to stop all this. So when they came and raided me, and they, you know, they were going all over the flat, and when they found it, there was a knowing in me. There was just a knowing that even though there was like tremendous fear and a screaming on many levels, deeply, there was a knowing in me as the handcuffs went on that this was the end of who I was. And that now I would get what I was deeply calling for.
In your book, you mention about there was a kind of sadhana that you had in prison, which was the eating.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
How did you find that so transformative?
Yeah. The conditions that I was under were so shocking, extremely shocking. You know, the prison was completely in silence. You're not allowed one word. And I was with Japanese. I was the only Westerner. And so I was put into this situation in a factory where you were taken to eat, and everything's in silence, and it's a mad situation where, I mean, it would take me a long time to really describe that situation, but it's really, really shocking. And when I arrived in there, my whole system went, I can't eat under these conditions. And all of the prisoners, as soon as they were given the signal, because you had 6 minutes to eat.
Oh.
And the whole process was to take 20 minutes. But that the rest of the time was in scrutinizing that there's the same amount of food on each plate and nobody's cheating. And there was all this really, really crazy thing. And all of the people sitting there like that to attention, waiting. And when they're given the signal to eat, they started scoffing like animals. And I just was like, no way, I cannot enter this greed, this fear, I cannot. It was like a river. It was like an energy of fear, hatred, greed. All of the feelings that were in these people the energy of that was like a river in this field, and when I sat in there, all I could do was close my eyes and go in. I couldn't look at them. I could not connect. I just stayed in, couldn't eat. So after 3 months, and I was losing a lot of weight, and I was being interrogated as to why I wouldn't eat and all of that. When I began to I started with a tiny little teaspoon, and I would put it in my mouth, and then I would close my eyes, and I would connect to the food and to where it came from, where it grew, who nurtured the soil, the sun, everything, and who carried it, who brought it there, who cooked it, everything about the food until it arrived in my mouth. And I would connect with that, and I'll be chewing until it became saliva. So during that process, if it was a carrot in my mouth, it was like I became that. There was no more separation between me and the carrot. It's just like there's nothing left but carrot, right? So then I would just like drink the saliva of that, and I wasn't in that river anymore. I was in some other realm where I was blissed out. I was blissed out, but I could eat like a tiny amount in that 6 minutes, right? But I'd come out of there blissed, and then when I'd open my eyes, they'd all be staring at me with daggers, like judgment and criticism and greed and hatred. Like they'd be sending all this energy through their eyes, and I had to just close my eyes and stay with that bliss. And in that way, it's like I rose up of it and into another level. And that was the only way that I could eat. And so I started doing this 3 times a day because we were taken in that factory for a day. And it was wonderful because it was a doorway. It wasn't like, okay, I'll do this and then I'll go through that doorway. It wasn't an agenda. It was just what happened. And so it was a doorway that took me into, I'd come out of there blissed. We'd have to go and stand to attention in these long rows and be counted again 8 times a day. And they'd count the numbers and I'd just be like in a state of bliss. And in the beginning, they were all looking at me with like, because I was this odd alien. But after a while, they started looking more inquisitive and more. But it was like when I came into this realm, it was like their judgments, their criticism, their hatred, the energy that was sent, nothing could touch me. And I have to say that everything was touching me. I was living in hell. Like during the factory time, we were all in a factory in silence, working like a dog. And they were sending all these daggers all the time. And the first 9 months in there, that was hitting my system. And I was really knowing what it is to be a victim of mental cruelty in silence, but this was a doorway where it was amazing because it was my connection with Osho and the total surrender that I had made that night taking sannyas, and the connection all I had, because there was no visits and no talking, and I was solitary confined, so all I had was his books, and I'd read one page and I'd just kind of drown in what he was pointing to. And so this was the only relationship, and so it was guiding me.
So after the prison experience, where did your life move to then?
I was deported back into a shocking world, back in England, and I stayed 6 months, and I was then back in Pune again. And I did a long bodywork training and had to go through all of the getting all of that out of my system. So I took quite I was already in a state that I couldn't describe to anyone. I couldn't speak where I was to anyone. There was nobody who could possibly understand where I was in myself, but I wasn't the one who went in. And I witnessed, because there was no ego. There was nobody here. So when I came out, I had to learn I had to like find out how to relate again in this world. And then I watched structures of personality and egoic tendencies to arise again to be able to operate in this world. But I watched all of that happen, knowing that I'm not that. But I didn't know how to describe this, that was seeing through all of this. And there was nobody I could relate to. It's not like it is today, where it's just about everywhere. Everybody's talking about who you are as awareness behind your thoughts, behind your conditioning and all of that. It wasn't. The only person I'd ever heard talking about it was Osho, or I'd read it in books, but there was absolutely nobody. So I was back in the ashram. I did all the clearing of my body, mind, all of the pain and the trauma. And still, it was like I had this tear running down my face constantly. It was like, I call it a truth tear. And it was when I would speak from that, it was like so penetrating. And I'd be hitting people in some kind of place that kind of stopped their mind.
Oh.
But there was nobody I could relate to from this place. Then there's a lot more in between that, but somebody gave me a woman called Delano in Pune. Somebody gave me her number, and then this was already 3 years later after I got out, because I was already walking with this state, but not that it's a state, but not able to relate to anybody from here. So I was alone with it, totally alone with it. And then somebody gave me the phone number of Delano and said she's doing like direct satsang, which, you know, Osho's body was gone. So everything I was receiving from him was disembodied. So here was someone in the body. Different thing, right? So I contacted straight away. She told me to come. I went there and I took her 1 month satsang intensive. And in the very first meeting, when she began talking about what she called "Who am I?", it was just like, you know, I knew that the shift that had taken place in prison was what was being spoken of and called awakening, or, you know, some call enlightenment, but I have different language for that.
I love in the book how you talk about the knowing of who am I is just really the starting point.
It is the starting point.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been talking about this for over 20 years. Like, you know, over 20 years I've been holding meetings and retreats talking about this. And it became very easy for me right from the start, from that moment. Even before I went to Delano, I was blasting people's minds into a direct experience of what she called "Who am I?" It was very easy for me to do that. And I was giving individual sessions right from, even before I went to Delano, I was giving individual sessions. And a way found itself through me to bring this direct recognition clear for almost anybody who was ready. But I could see really, really, really clearly, and through my own process also, that this is just the beginning. All of the patterning, all of who you were before, who you thought you were, who you've been living as, this personality, this egoic, nothing wrong with egoic structures, the conditionings, the patterns of conditions, the separate sense of a self, that doesn't just disappear when this is recognized. That has a life of its own. It's how you behave. It's how you've learned to behave. It's how you've learned to survive in this world. You know, and it's been needed. And so just because there's this direct recognition of I am that which looks through these eyes, I am looking through, I am the one who is aware of every thought, feeling, sensation, I am that which is aware and looks through every pair of eyes, when this recognition, bang, stops the mind and this clear seeing happens, then that doesn't automatically shift all the patterning to line up with that and start behaving differently. It's almost as if there's two of you. It's like there's this clear seeing without any doubt, but the way of behaving and walking and talking and is operating by itself. So it's almost as if there's two. And I say this is the first duality. Yeah. So from that moment on, and this is always what I made clear in every one of my individual sessions, I didn't feel it was fair to stop somebody's mind and show them, like, open their awareness and show them eternal reality without saying, hey, everything in your body mind is going to come back full force in a minute. All of it is going to come right here. Everything that you haven't met, everything you haven't felt, everything you haven't integrated is going to come on your table. It's going to manifest through your relative life now to be seen from a new place. Now you step into those places and you update those behaviors as you're seeing. You come in, you need to feel the pain, you need to feel the grief, you need to feel what you've tucked in your back pocket, and you need to update. And this takes a moment to moment to moment honesty. And in that way, that begins to bring the realization into the body. So the body is then updated and the body begins to behave aligned to this awareness that looks through every pair of eyes.
How does sadhana, would you say, how would that help in the direct path?
I would say, especially now, more than ever, it's needed. A practice. You don't need any practice to become what you already are. You don't need a practice for that. However, it's needed enough. Like when we practice, our living practice every day is what then, how to say, I still need a certain way of living to create the environment that supports my body mind to stay aligned. If there's no sadhana, that means like being willing to de-stress the body, look at the triggers. When something gets triggered in the system, there needs to be enough presence to catch it in that moment and sit in the middle of that without that overtaking. And how much space you've got from that comes out of your practice. Because if you don't have a living practice and you haven't practiced to have enough presence, then a trigger happens to the system. Doesn't matter if you know that you are pure awareness, a trigger happens to the system and all your child trauma comes up and the behavior just kicks off by itself and runs into patterns that are like automated. If you have a living daily practice, you have space to be able to see what's happening and not run with it. It matters. It really matters. And I can say that living this 25 years or whatever it is, I need, like I roll my yoga mat out. For me, it's that I need proper connection with food. I need proper quiet. I need quiet time. I need space to be for me. I need connection to nature. I need these things. And this is my living practice. But it's not to become, it's to help this body mind, not get overwhelmed by the tremendous onslaught that all of our body minds are dealing with.
Thank you, Ananta. So how did the book come about? What looks through your eyes? What was the idea for the book?
Oh, wow. This was never my idea. We say that life is happening by itself. This moment is happening by itself. It started with people used to come to my retreats, and this was way back in Switzerland. One of the named, Michele, who's named in the first page, who my gratitude goes to, he said to me, look, I want to help you write a book. And I was like, okay, right. And he said, I want to transcribe your talks. Is that okay? I said, yeah, go for it. And he started to transcribe the talks, and he said it was so powerful for him that he got really into it, and he was making transcriptions. And that started to happen over the years. Like I met someone else in Thailand, and she was like, I want to transcribe your talks. And yeah, go ahead. She started doing exactly that and loving the process. And so at a certain point, then Joanne, who's also named in the book, she just kind of like at some point started putting things together and saying like, hey, now we have these transcriptions, we have this, we have that. So in an organic way, it started to, suddenly there was enough material to go into a book. And then, yeah, like the idea, it started to get more and more talked about, and then it was all there just waiting for the next step. And then actually I met you and you told me about your friend who makes books, and we connected, and he happened to know me he knew my work and my story, and said, I really want to do this. And again, it just everyone played their part, and all of a sudden there was this beautiful the book that you showed, manifestation. And I'm just so touched of how it came about, and I'm so grateful. Really, I never sat and read the book from start to finish, but if I pick up the book and I open it, it's just like immediately I know how these came about, because these transcriptions are living satsang talks, and the energy is in these pages, and it really is. It's not a book that you pick up and just read, so yeah.
I love how in the book you put the little boxes with notes to readers. It just kind of gives them the space to sit and think and reflect on what they've just written, what they've just read. And there's so many of those little boxes through the book. Note to reader.
Yeah.
Really beautiful idea to do that.
That was also part of Tej idea, who was the guy, the beautiful being who helped create the book. And also the reason for doing that is because at the beginning of every one of my meetings, my live talks, always everybody that enters into the space, they come in and they have to turn their phones off. They have to leave everything else behind. The way that I work is quite intense, and I kind of demand that everybody is fully present. So the people have to enter the space like that. And so then I'm guiding them into the depth of what this is. And so that is at the beginning of each chapter. He has taken these droppings, like these sections that are where that happens at the beginning of each, and it's important that the reader doesn't just, you know, pick up the book and go, oh yeah, and read the words, but actually turns the phone off and takes the space as if they're entering a satsang room and reads each paragraph just slowly, and then sit with that and go to where the words are pointing. And if they really do that, then they will enter the field. And then when the interaction starts taking place, which are live, genuine questions from seekers, and it's happening in a field of satsang, which is a transmission. It's not that I'm there with a box full of answers to give. I am just rooted in this field of divine presence that responds to the question answer is a call and response of itself. And the reader, if they really enter the field this way, they will enter the field this way and really get the transmission. And that's the beauty. And I think that's kind of a different way than just kind of reading. I'm not talking about something or repeating. You know, these talks came from, I think, 2015. Many of them came from a little balcony in Thailand. And what I was talking then is a lot of that is being talked about more now. And so the words might seem like common talk, but if you really enter the space and you really get the transmission, it's not in the words, it's where the words come from. And then you know that you are the space in which the question and answer unfolds.
The whole concept of consciousness, when we own consciousness, when we are that, it's such a simple thing to be. It's instant. It's not a memory. It's just there. Why is it so difficult for people to grasp?
Well, they try to grasp it with the thinking, don't they? They try to grasp it through understanding, and it cannot be understood. It cannot be grasped by someone, by the mind, in the thinking process. It can only be heard or recognized by itself, which is in the space between this word and the next.
Thank you, Ananta. So, Ananta, obviously there's lots and lots of spiritual books that are printed every year. What do you think makes this book the must-buy for this year? What looks through your eyes? What is it that makes it the one that everybody should finish this Saturday and go out and order it online? What would be the...
Exactly. I think I answered that before. Exactly what I was just saying is that it's an entering of a field in which the presence of that field is timeless, and it's more than any book can tell you about. It's an invitation to enter the field, and lots of questions and answers happen in that field. And I think in this book, many subjects were touched upon. You know, the pain and the suffering, the getting it, the losing it, the going in and out of recognition, the masculine, the feminine, all of these seekers' questions were touched upon in this book. And if you enter the field, as I said, and like really enter the space, and you then read it really slowly, to drink a little drop, just like the carrot. You become it.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you. So now you're getting ready for a retreat. So you're in Portugal now.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really, really, really happy to be here. And Beverly Retreat coming on the 13th to the 18th. I love the spaciousness and the light here in Portugal. And yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Is it full or is there still spaces if people want to join you?
There's space. Yeah, it's small. I think that people with the whole travel thing, less and less people have got used to not traveling.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean that, and there hasn't been that much promotion. But yeah, there's space, and there's a beautiful little group of beings coming together, and really with depth. You know, I tend to attract people who are like really ready to go deep. That's that's the kind of type that I attract. I had a message from someone this morning who said to me that when she first came to one of my retreats, she was aware of the depth, and then she became aware of like all the, she called it the darkness inside her. Means the unconsciousness, really, because the unconscious comes to light. And so it's really about those who are ready to go deep. Yeah, I don't really attract a lot of beginners to retreats, but I do offer a lot of 2-hour meetings that people can start with there. And people can also join online if they don't want to travel. But it's really so juicy to be in the flesh, and I love to include dance, some great music, and some joy, letting go, and you know, all of the things that I have been part of my path. The Osho flavor is still here.
I love the oils that you introduce in your satsangs. How did they come about?
I'm a lover of the plant kingdom, and I feel the power. I feel real connection to the plants, and the fragrance, the aroma, the oils they produce. It's quite a big part of my life. You know, I burn oils all the time. I use them all the time on my skin and for everything. And what I found is, I first started to, you know, someone would come and sit in front of me in what we call the hot seat. And I started to see how nervous they were and how scared and like, you know, and I just was like, oh, you know, here. And I just drop a bit of Palo Santo or something into their palm and say, take it. And they take this breath, and then they'd be like, ah. And suddenly they'd just be here. And just, it was like we'd bypassed a lot of what might have taken a lot of time to work through. The fear and the nervousness was just gone, and here we are, boom, and there they were, like, oh. And actually, I'll back up a bit, because I was living in Thailand for many years, and so the retreats were always out in the open, you know, on the balcony or in the open, and I would burn Palo Santo and frankincense, these big balls of smoke, and I'd have someone come and sit right in the middle of that. So all the frankincense smoke would just kind of like, you know, frankincense is known to remove all the layers of the unconscious. And so they'd sit there like blissing out in this smoke. And the retreats became really like, it was part of the intoxication of the deliciousness of aroma and the plants and all that stuff. But when I came to England 5-6 years ago, I then had to do them indoors in a house, and I couldn't burn the smoke. So then I started using the oils instead. Yeah,
Beautiful.
but I'll be using smoke here.
Good. So, Ananta, we've only got a few minutes left, and I just want to put it out there if anybody wants to ask any questions. So I'm just going to whiz through on the chat, see if there's any questions here. Let's have a look. someone's asking that Osho left his body. Didn't he leave? Didn't he leave his body in Pune? He did leave his body in Pune, didn't he? Because he was cremated in Pune, just near the
Yeah.
ashram, wasn't he?
Yeah. I was
Okay.
going to say, did he leave a will?
So, Ananta, someone's asking, Peggy Keller is asking, what was your book that was written earlier? That was your prison book, wasn't it?
That was a diary, that my personal diary, very personal diary. I never, ever, ever imagined it would become public. That I wrote while I was on trial, and it was my daily accounts. It was my daily expressing myself while I was being held on trial, not knowing if I was going to prison or not, but knowing, and in extreme shock and devastation and going through hell. Every day I would pour that onto paper, and yeah, I just happened to find it in my father's shed 20 odd years later, and I shared it with Joanne, and she said, "This is like, do you want to make it public?" Because it just really, really exposes the inner workings of the mind. And the amazing thing about that book is, of that diary, is that I was pretty awake. I'd just come from Pune, and I did have recognition. So I was writing it from a point of witnessing.
Hmm.
And that's amazing. I mean, I was going through hell, but I was writing it from a point of witnessing.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I did almost reluctantly share it publicly. But yeah.
Thank you, Ananta. There's a question here from Jacob Sabat. It's a long question here. So, has fear, anxiety, sorrow, despair, loneliness, shame, guilt, confusion, inner conflict, irritation, hurt, addiction, ambition, competition, seeking pleasure, desiring to be somebody, vanity, envy, greed, jealousy, attachments, possessiveness, ill will, hatred, bias, and prejudice come to a complete and utter end in each and every moment of your daily life, once and for all, now and forever? If not, what? Just ashes in the mouth.
um, well, the answer to that is yes and no. Because it's like saying, it's as if there are two of you, right? Who and what I am. Yes, there's none of that in what I am. Can all of that arise? Absolutely. Absolutely. It can all arise in any moment. It has to do, it's not about that not arising. And we imagined that so-called enlightenment, and that's what prevented me from recognizing the shift that had happened for me, because I was expecting, oh no, I can't, this can't be what Osho's talking about, because I've still got this anger, I've still got this jealousy, I've still got these things are still arising, right? That was in the beginning, right? It's very different now than it was then. It's not about those aspects not arising. They're arising just as life is arising. All of life is arising in consciousness. All of the manifestation of every little bit of what this life is arising in pure consciousness. That is going on and on forever. So the space in which all of that arises, just like the sky is untouched by the clouds, right? The weather is coming and going constantly. The sky is actually non-existent, but let's call it sky. The space in which all of that arises is free. So I am the space in which all of that arises. And this is not a spiritual bypass. When something like irritation arises through my system, which I get to experience that quite often, being squeezed into conditions. I have very challenging conditions to live through, always did have, maybe always will, who knows. when irritation, I'll say that because that's the one that arises a lot, that arises freely in the space that I am. And that is the difference, is there is freedom here that allows everything. And nothing is left out. And there's no denial, there's no running from, there's no disconnection. There is a absolute total feeling of what is here freely. So I will feel it all from a place of who I really am. And that is where embodiment of who I am takes place. There's not a distancing, there's not a denying, there's not a repressing, there's not a bypassing. There is a wave rising through and falling back into the ocean of being that I am.
Beautiful, thank you, Ananta. Let's see any other questions here. Here we are. Do you treat everyone, even the person who wants to do you harm, with the same intensity and quality of care and affection that you would give to your children, mother, father, brother, sister, or dearest, closest friend or lover, without any sense of division or separation in each and every moment of daily life?
There's a lot in there. So care and affection, what does care and affection look like in the first place? That's something we could open up. We could open that up and spend 2 hours on that. So I play the role of a carer for my father, who has dementia, and I oversee that whole situation. My brother, I have some extreme family things going on, really extreme, and I am helping 4 of them. Okay, from a place of care and affection. Am I always, do I shout sometimes? Yes, I do. Am I angry sometimes? Yes, I am. Does it come from the love and the care? Yes, it does. Do I treat everybody in that way? I treat everybody with the full intention of bringing them to know who they are and to find freedom. And whatever that takes, whatever that calls from me, that can look like anything, but it comes always from the same place with the same intention, to bring somebody to the freedom, to liberation, to the truth of who they are. And if somebody is coming anywhere near me saying that they are looking for freedom, spirituality, or truth, I will use whatever it takes.
Beautiful.
And sometimes that's a sword.
Ananta, thank you so much. It's been so lovely seeing you today, and obviously I'm looking forward to see you in the very near future.
Yeah, why aren't you coming to Portugal?
I've just come back from Israel, actually, just literally.
Don't know how you do it.
But I just want to say to everybody that the book, there's a little thing in the chat room that you can get it at the shop.watkinsbooks.com, and it's Looks Through Your Eyes by
It's not, it's a question. What is looking through your eyes?
And it's available on the Watkins book
What
website.
looks through your eyes? What looks through your eyes? Last thing, for the retreat coming up, there is an early price until midnight tonight. So I should mention that. That's my promotional thing coming in.
Good. What a blessing it would be to be with you in Portugal.
Thank you. Thanks, Leon. Ciao. Ciao, everyone.